Hello everyone, my name is Megan Middleton, an associate at DTM in London, and today we are here with Wynsey, Denisa, Giulia, Nowsha, and Peniel, the winners of the DTM second hackathon conducted in London. Through this interview, we aim to explore their research project on sex-based decision-making in the climate mobility nexus, as seen in the Somali region in Ethiopia. So, to start, Peniel, can you please tell us, what was the research question that guided your hackathon idea? And why did you select Ethiopia as your case study?
Hi, everyone. So our assigned research question was one with historical analysis framing, and it had asked us what was the relationship between certain climatic patterns and types of human mobility in the region, and what were the implications of these patterns. And so we sort of did some preliminary research to see what was out there, and particularly what caught our attention was some recent findings from the Mixed Migration Center's interviews of thousands of migrants who had rarely reported environmental factors as a push factor for migration. In particular, within East Africa, less than 1% of their respondents identified environmental factors as a reason for migrating. But they noted that when they added a series of questions relating to experiences of environmental and natural hazards, the role, and specifically sort of asked them about the role of environmental factors in their decision, their responses kind of changed and revealed a perception, a difference in perception of environmental factors. And so for us, that was interesting. We also chose the Somali region because it recorded high levels of extreme weather event, specifically being the epicenter of the ongoing drought in East Africa, causing quite a high number of displaced populations within the region and within Ethiopia itself. And so based on that sort of geographical area and the research that the Mixed Migration Center had put forward, we decided to test 3 of 7 key messages that they had presented from their findings, particularly asking whether there was a difference between Somali region's female and male migrants' destination when they cite environmental factors as their reason for moving. Whether given the same climatic conditions, female migrants and male migrants articulate environmental reasons separately from other drivers. And lastly, with climate mobility occurring and expecting to increase, for women and men, or male and female migrants who've decided to move, does it impact? Does the climate variability, for one, impact when they decide to move? And does the difference in their timing, is there a difference sort of in the timing between female and male migrants? And so these were sort of the research questions jumping off an existing research that we decided to study.
Thank you for that. And Nowsha, if you could clarify, what is the linkage between climate mobility and gender, and how is this reflected in the data?
Thank you very much for your question. So according to existing literature and research, climate crisis disproportionately impacts women and girls due to a plethora of socioeconomic factors that are often unique to their respective contexts, but results in highly similar negative implications pertaining to extreme weather events caused by climate change. Women may be affected by climate change-induced events such as droughts or flood, leading to increased migration or displacement. UN estimates predict that climate migrants will continue to predominantly constitute women and girls, as they may also be compelled to move due to safety and security concerns, particularly in regions experiencing climate-induced conflict. Therefore, IOM has identified gender equality as a significant lens through which it operationalizes its data and research, while considering the determinants, causes, and consequences of climate migration. IOM operates multiple projects and programs integrating findings from data on how climate migration can be conceptualized as a gendered process. Thank you.
That's great. And Peniel, how can a gender perspective help us understand the relationship between climatic factors and migration decisions in Ethiopia?
So by further understanding the gendered nature of climate mobility, we can provide one, gender sensitive and transformative support to climate migrants, for which there are many in the Ethiopia region, and knowing that the UN, as Nowsha said, estimates that these would be predominantly women and girls, it is important for us to see how there's a gendered impact and a gendered perspective in this climate mobility nexus, to shorten it. Within Ethiopia specifically, on cross-cutting issues like migration and gender, there is draft policy that recognizes that migration is a gendered phenomenon. But when you look sort of like national policy on women, it does not address the gendered aspect of migration. And so having that understanding allows us to sort of see beyond the obvious reasons why people move and how they move. We noted that the researchers who've done literature reviews have revealed that migration research tends to suffer from a mobility bias. So they tend to focus on the push and pull factors while overlooking the reasons that people do not respond to those specific factors or resist those factors. And what we were positing is that gender could be a critical reason for that, and a lot of research supports that position. Gender could be a reason why people do not respond to traditional push and pull factors. Gender is social cultural. It is very context specific. And although our research is a little limited because we were looking at sex, it was also very important for us in that specific context, sex is very social cultural, a role to play and perform as well. And so by exploring these reasons from a gendered perspective, we can also even add in a layer of risk perception and how there's a difference between risk perception, which I think covers not just the drought that we're looking at, but other extreme weather events or the climate factors. And knowing that Ethiopia is positioned to see even more extreme weather events in the future, this insight allows us to begin to formulate interventions that are cognizant of the differences that exist across the genders.
Great. So, Giulia, based on your findings from the hackathon, for men and women who have decided to move due to climate factors, does climate variability impact when they decide to move, and does the time of this decision differ between males and females?
So first of all, we need to be very clear as to what we were assessing in our project. We were looking specifically at drought, and we were looking at correlations between data. So what we found is that we observed a correlation between drought severity and the number of environmental migrants on average at the national level. And as the severity of the droughts increases, so does the number of environmental migrants observed in each region nationally did. So basically, this suggests that the timing of their decisions to move may be influenced by the drought, although it doesn't establish causality in any way, but it is an interesting finding in that direction. Secondly, we observed that the variation between females and males respondents at the national level is different. Both sexes respond to the climate event, with women being more inclined to report environmental reasons for migrating at the drought onset, and with men reporting more gradually their migration and increasing with drought severity. So potentially reporting migration at higher levels of drought severity. This signals that, of course, both sexes, as I said, respond to the climate event on average in the country, and females are more susceptible to the drought at its onset, while male seems more resistant, leaving at later times. As we looked more specifically at the Somali region, we noticed that the susceptibility of women was particularly relevant in the region as opposed to the rest of the country. And this was an interesting finding, as there seemed to be some gendered patterns of migration, specifically in the region as opposed to the country overall. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And Wynsey, what challenges did you as a team encounter during the hackathon in relation to data analysis, and how did you address these?
Thank you for your question. I think the very fact that we only had less than 2 days to look at the data set that we have never seen before, and we had no code book for, was incredibly challenging. And also because all of us kind of have different experiences that we bring to the table, and some of us were a lot more familiar with R programming and also GIS or Google Earth Engine, and that created some kinds of difficulties with communicating any kind of findings that we had from our analysis, and also formulating and narrowing down our research question. But I think the main challenges with regards to data analysis was firstly in the choices that we had to make when we crafted our variables, particularly in trying to really estimate when participants in the survey data departed from their place of origin. So we had data on the date of survey, we had data on a range of when they probably left. But say if they specified that they left their place of origin between 2 weeks and 3 months, we would have to make a decision between how we would therefore estimate when they truly left. And I think we, as a group, decided to make a choice of adopting a more conservative approach and interpretation of what that meant. So if someone says that they left between 2 weeks and 3 months ago, then we would assume that they left 2 weeks ago. So like as late as possible, because we think that droughts are kind of a slow onset event and the qualitative literature supports that. So we give as much time as possible for people to respond, and that's the assumption that we made. Secondly, I think there was a bit of a challenge in finding a proper index that we could estimate severity with that was credible within the literature. So that required time and extra research. And then we had, thanks to Giulia, the ability to extrapolate the data from Google Earth Engine and then redo how other people have calculated drought severity in their studies using Google Earth Engine for our region specifically. So that took time, and then we were rushing it, and like the second day, and we were panicking because it was a really huge time constraint. So like I would say the last major challenge for us was to produce data in a coherent manner and be able to tell a story that was interpretable and useful for the team by the second day. So from cleaning to exploring the data to visualizing it, and then finally to running our models and our regression analysis just to look at whether any possible associations exist, not really to predict, but just to describe what we have on hand, was really challenging. And finally, like reaching the final stage where we had to submit our report was, it was tiring, but also really rewarding. So that was the biggest challenge for us.
That's great, thank you. And finally, Denisa, based on your research during the hackathon, what lessons can be learned from addressing sex-based decision-making in the climate mobility nexus? And how does this apply to the Ethiopian case study?
Thank you. Our findings revealed implications in risk perception and decision-making related to climate-induced migration. Notably, female migrants have shown a tendency to take more risks than their non-migrant counterparts, challenging common stereotypes about risk aversion. This highlights the complexity of migration decisions and the crucial role of gender that we've been emphasizing. Moreover, our analysis emphasizes the importance of going beyond merely disaggregating data by sex. To truly inform gender-sensitive policymaking and support, we advocate for a deeper exploration for gender-climate migration relations. We tried our best in the 2 days, as emphasized by everyone, but we really advocate for that. By leveraging historical data creatively, we aim to understand better and address the specific needs of different genders, enhancing support for vulnerable groups. Our research also points to the potential of gender empowerment as a pivotal element in communicating and managing climate risks. Initiatives like the Program for Climate Resilient Food Systems in Ethiopia illustrate the importance of structural support in addressing food insecurity and environmental challenges. Ultimately, our findings underscore the need for more nuanced, gender-responsive approaches in policy and practice, encouraging collaboration across borders and sectors to tackle the complexities of climate-induced migration.
So that draws us to a close. Thank you all so much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been very interesting to hear how your research idea has developed. And for our viewers, if you wish to further explore the nexus on climate mobility in the Eastern Horn of Africa, please check out the report published by IOM in collaboration with Snowflake and the participants of the London and Nairobi hackathon, which will be linked in the blog.